If you listen carefully, at the end, you'll be someone else. The man before me left his empty pint on the table and got up from the chair. He started to walk towards a small staircase in the back of the tavern. I didn't know if he expected me to follow him, but in my work you have to be a hungry hunter. For many years I had traveled the country, trying to discover good stories, secrets to unveil, details in people's lives that were meant to remain buried. More than once I had to intrude in places where I was not welcome. A journalist's innate curiosity is his primary instinct, and I was one of the best in that. As I climbed the stairs behind him, the rumors of the storm and the voices slowly faded. It was a dark evening in October. The last remains of daylight were still struggling to enter through the tavern windows, although the heavy rain outside made it difficult. When I finally arrived, I found myself in a small room that only had a tiny round table and a pair of chairs. The remains of a fire were still burning in the fireplace, giving us some light, which contrasted with the tremulous shine that entered through the soaked windows. I walked in slowly and left my pint on the table, trying to catch a full glimpse of his face. Downstairs, the tavern had been bathed in a flickering candlelight, so I could not really see him in detail. It had been a difficult conversation so far. The place had been getting more and more crowded with people who tried to find shelter from the storm, and the atmosphere was getting excessively loud to have a private meeting. "So, do you really believe you're immortal?" I asked. "It's not about what I believe, although belief has a lot to do with my story," he said, looking at me. Now that I could see him clearly, he seemed younger than I thought downstairs. Yet he had a thin beard and some wrinkles on his face, and the dark circles below his eyes pointed out that he was really sick, or maybe terribly tired, as if he hadn't slept in a few days. "In your letter, you said you were interested in hearing my story, and now you seem kind of incredulous," he pointed out. I took a long sip of beer before answering. "Frankly, I don't know what to think. Yes, some people had told me I could find the eternal man in this town. Still, I was expecting something different. Actually, I don't really know what I was expecting. However, you will not pretend I'll believe your story." "Well, if it's curiosity, what motivates you?" he started, but I interrupted him. "I am curious, of course, but I really need this story done. The journal is about to fire me. I have been looking for a good story, for months, actually. When I heard about you, I thought I could give it a try, to come and see if I could get something new, to keep my job, and—" I stopped as he started to laugh. "So you're a journalist," said the man, laughing to himself. He looked somehow disappointed. "I didn't mean to offend you," I said quickly. We kept silent for a moment, while the rain outside kept chanting its heavy song. "I never got your name," I said, trying to break the silence. "I have had many different names in my life. The priests in Notre Dame called me Thomas. The rich merchants in Venice called me Francesco. A gypsy family I traveled with simply called me Roma. I guess my name is not so important. After all, I have been alive so many centuries that titles lose meaning. And that's the story you want me to tell, right?" I nodded and quickly grabbed some paper and something to write. "When did you find out you were immortal?" I asked, trying to hint him towards the story like I always did. "It's a long story, but you probably know some details already. It all began with a revolutionary leader, a man of great wisdom who thought he could change the world by teaching people about love and humanity. He looked at the window for a moment and started his story. Back in that time, things were really different. The world itself and the lives of the people were shaped according to the will of the powerful, and no one could do anything about that. You grew up to be what you were born to be and nothing else. About the big Roman Empire, try to imagine the biggest nation you possibly can. It was a territory of constant development, where the latest discoveries of science and architecture brought a solution to every problem we could find. I myself was born in a poor family, so I didn't have too many options. When I came to the proper age, I was accepted as a soldier recruit. The next 4 months were very difficult as we had to be physically prepared to be accepted as full-fledged soldiers. About my life, back then, he stopped as I cleared my throat. You don't really expect me to believe in this, do you? That then, I said. "I'm just telling you the story you asked for," he said, calmly interrupting my stutter. After those words, I laughed with cynicism. "But you're talking about the old Roman Empire. I know I came here to hear about an immortal man, but I need at least some consistency from you, not just to be taken as a naive fool." My skepticism was becoming anger, as I felt he was mocking me. For an answer, he smiled kindly. "No, I guess I can't. Tell me, what did you expect when you came here to find me?" I remained silent, knowing that no answer was possible. Did I expect something? In fact, I had to admit, at least to myself, that I thought I was going to meet a good liar, like almost every time that I had to interview someone different for the journal. "As I said," he continued, "you don't have to believe in me. You came here for a good story." Without waiting for my consent, he gave a short laugh and continued talking like nothing had happened at all. "I guess there is too much to tell about my life as a Roman soldier, my companions, the battles I fought, all the things I saw, but that would take too much time. I prefer to go straight to the events that led me to becoming the eternal man." I tried not to look as angry as I felt, knowing that I had no right to demand anything. I made a welcoming gesture with my hands. Many years after I became a soldier, we began to hear about this particular man. You see, back then, the so-called prophets were more common than you think. Men with great charisma, a certain knowledge about cults and religion, some leadership skills. They appeared occasionally, taking advantage of a town that wasn't always happy with their rulers. Therefore, when we first heard about this man, we just thought he was another young lad, crazy enough or self-confident enough to think he spoke in the name of God. The people said he had been baptized in the Jordan River by his own cousin, a man whose story had already arrived to us from the moment he started to talk against the king. As the months passed, his name became more and more common for us. Rumors of him having traveled far away to learn the wisdom of the people in the Indian land. Rumors of him having retreated for 40 days in the desert by himself to awaken his own divine consciousness. Rumors of him traveling through Palestine to speak to the people about his own interpretation of Judaism. As the time passed, more and more news about this man was in the common talk of the people, and obviously that attracted the attention of the rulers. We even heard about all kinds of miracles around him, sick people who got better and even returned to life, for example. I was transferred to Jerusalem a few years before that. The Roman Empire had expanded greatly in the last centuries, and that city, along with many others, was under our control for many decades. The power was divided between the Roman prefects and the priest of a group of wise men called the Sanhedrin. In that time, the church was a symbol of power. Even more than now, I would say. That council had power over the life of the citizens. Do you know what's funny about powerful people? They live every day looking back over their shoulder, afraid of anyone who would take over their power. That power, deep within, they know it's fragile. And when they heard that this particular man was coming to Jerusalem with a crowd that followed him, they knew that something had to be done immediately. When he finally arrived, we were called to keep guard positions in every one of the important squares of the city. We had heard that hundreds of people had gathered at the main gates of Jerusalem, greeting him as the only one king, the son of David, the Son of God. The hours passed and tension filled the air. Something would happen soon, for better or worse. We got word that he had been straight to the main temple, which had been overrun by merchants and scoundrels for years. Some fellow soldiers told me he had thrown them out, all of them, as if his words had some kind of strange force. He alone recovered the temple for himself. We knew then that the priests would act soon. The man got up from his chair and went to the window. The rain had already stopped, and the night had arrived an hour ago. I discovered myself trapped by the story, although I still felt mocked. One thing was to declare himself as an immortal man, and to tell me a story for the newspaper. But to tell that bunch of lies, almost like he was testing how much I could hear before I got fed up, was too much. He turned to face me with a serious expression on his face. What can I do to convince you I'm telling the truth? I don't know. What could you do? He laughed briefly. As I already said, I have never convinced anyone with my story. Perhaps that is the curse I get for my sins. I couldn't decide if I was irritated or intrigued. So, tell me. How is it that you ended up being the eternal man? I guess it has to do with the end of my story, he said, returning to his chair. I grabbed the paper again. Here I was, after all. Some days later, we heard the man was to be judged that morning. He had been taken prisoner without even resisting. Of course, he was found guilty of everything. Calling yourself the Son of God was a great sin back then, one that not only defied the religion itself, but also spread the shadow of the rebellion around the people. The Sanhedrin sentenced him to suffer one of the worst punishments, to be crucified to death, a common punishment back then. We were told that before his death he had to be stripped of his dignity, ridiculed. We had to show our power and domination, not only against him, but also against anyone else who would dare to call himself the Messiah. That morning, we weren't just killing a man, we were destroying the myth behind him. Watching people be crucified, it's a thing one never forgets. The sound of the flesh crunching as they nail them to the wood, the agonic screams, and the hopeless vision of seeing them hanging, exhausted, when the pain has drained the force out of their bodies. I was among the guards who were already at the execution site waiting for him to arrive. I had never seen a man like him, I must admit. In his eyes, I could clearly read a spark of hope and compassion along with the terrible pain he was suffering. I think that was the moment when I started to feel really afraid of that man. Who could he be? Fearless and strangely oblivious of what was about to happen. Even when I saw him hanging on his cross, I saw in his face nothing but pain and mercy. But it was more than just physical pain. He looked like a father, scared for his son's destiny. He seemed worried and disappointed. No. In fact, he gave us all a look of piety and forgiveness. The man stuttered, moving his hands over the table. His eyes became lost for a moment, as if he was very far from me, far from here and far from now. His face quickly alternated through brief emotions: doubt, fear, sadness, concern. What happened next? I insisted. For some weird reason, I needed to listen to the end of that story. He died. After a while, he died, and everything turned black. I nodded my head. I had been expecting that part of the story. Well, not black exactly, but night fell down suddenly. Some of the people gathered around us started to flee in despair. Even some soldiers quickly retreated. I was about to do the same when one of my superiors gave me a push on my back and told me to make sure that he was dead. I didn't want to go closer to him. Even his immobile corpse was a source of power and horror, as if from one moment to another, he would open his eyes and bring doom and suffering to us. Just being there was terrifying to me, not to mention touching him. So I took my spear and stuck it in his body, holding my breath. I was containing my own breath, hanging on the details of the story. Every time the man made a pause, I felt the need to hint him toward the next word. Nothing happened? I suggested. No, something did happen. It's just that I'm not sure about it. I don't know if I do remember it, or if it's a memory of a memory. But I seem to recall hearing a voice in my head telling me to walk restlessly until I met him again. What happened then? I don't know. I remained silent, looking at him in doubt. For real, I don't remember what happened next. I never did. The next thing I remember is waking up in a gypsy camp, many miles to the west. Waking up? I asked, surprised with the turn of events. Well, not exactly waking up. I regained my consciousness, like I had been shut down, like I had been living and moving without being aware of anything. He stopped talking for a moment. Could it be that you simply don't remember what happened after the crucifixion? I asked. No, it's not a memory loss. After regaining my self-awareness, I started to talk with the people in the camp, trying to understand what had happened. Of course, everyone knew about Jesus and his fate, although I knew they were hiding some details from me, surely because they recognized me as a Roman soldier. And from what I could understand, 5 years had passed since those events. I left the camp a few days later, determined to go back to Rome, but for some unknown reason, I never got back. Every time my steps seemed to take me closer to my home, something happened that delayed my arrival. Someone asking for help, closed roads due to a war near us, encountering bandits that left me nearly naked and badly hurt, and many other unexpected turn of events. The thing is, the years passed, and I never returned to Rome. But while my life continued between weird adventures and strange delays, I started to suspect something was happening to me. I remained unchanged. The seasons came and went. The time passed. I lost count of how many years I'd been wandering those lands. But I was always the same person, unaltered, never touched by time, eternal. I don't really know what happened to the rest of the soldiers. If they died some years later, or if they roamed the world just like me. I never found any trace of them. I really hope they found some rest in the merciful release of death. As for me, I have already seen too many people die as the time passes. In the end, you give up on loving, on hoping. When your time is eternal, time itself loses meaning. And with these last words, he fell silent. I remained frozen, looking at him. In the last minutes, an unpleasant feeling of emptiness had been growing in my stomach. I could not identify if it was fear, rejection, or even pity for him. I could feel the seconds passing. His eyes were locked on me, like he was expecting an answer. But I just could not. I was far beyond belief. I didn't care about the truth anymore. I just wanted to break that silence, to say something, to get up and return to the noisy tavern where everything seemed normal. His eyes trapped me. I tried to remember how I had arrived in that situation, only to force myself to think of anything but the man. I remembered it all started when I first heard about him and thought it was a good story. Or maybe when I climbed up a staircase in the back of a noisy tavern.